Welcome back, and here we are for the last talk before lunch. So that's good news. It's good talk as well, so don't feel hard done by. Today I'd like to introduce Chad, who is a software engineer. They are a very well-respected person in the local user groups. I have seen you at a bunch of different technology user groups in the Yorkshire area.
I get around.
Yeah, you're a pretty familiar face, so it's really fabulous to have them here at PHP Yorkshire. And the topic is something which I think is very important and which would improve all of our applications if we were a bit more aware and a bit more clued up on how to do it. So I'm delighted that both Chad and this topic are here today. Go for it.
Oh. Awesome. Hows and whys of asking users who they are. So just a quick intro, because I like talking about myself. Hello. So I work at Sky, down in Leeds. It's really nice, actually, to be at a conference where I can say down in Leeds, because usually I'm speaking in London, I have to say up in Leeds, and they're all like, Leeds, oh, what is this mystical place? But I can say it's down in Leeds, and it's a little bit boring. I use they and them as my pronouns. So if you're tweeting about this, you say, hey, they are awesome. That's what you say for all of your tweets, nothing else. Speaking of Twitter, I'm Kitation on Twitter. This is my email address. This banner at the top is going to have my Twitter handle on it most of the time, because I always get halfway through someone else's talk, want to tweet them and forget what their Twitter handle is. But also there'll be things up there like references and kind of cool external links and stuff. I also use, there's a thing called the Dizzy hashtag. So if you see in the top corner, you see DZY, that means there's animation on the next slide for people who suffer with kind of motion sickness and fun things like that. Users, eh? So software doesn't work without people who use it. If you're in kind of Kieran's talk earlier, he was talking about that, we make software and we like making software, but actually we want software to be used by other people. Otherwise, it's not very fulfilling and we don't make any money, and we like money. The problem with users is that people are really, really complex. There's an infinite number of human experiences based on all sorts of factors. Not one person, not two people are the same. The problem with computers is computers aren't very complex at all. Computers aren't very clever. They kind of deal in kind of very simple kind of absolutes, and people aren't absolute. And the way we've traditionally dealt with this in technology is we basically try to grab as many people as possible in like a massive like fishing net, let's go with cool analogies, and funnel them through a single journey, right? So if I'm buying a book from Amazon, or if I'm signing up to buy a train ticket, or I'm signing up to Heroku or something, like every user goes through that same sign-up process. And we all use the same registration forms, login forms, etc. Even though we're different people. So you're channeling the entirety of human experience through a single login form. Like I said, and we tend to cast a really wide net to get as many people as possible. And the problem with this is there are going to be people that you leave out. There are going to be people that you miss, people who kind of can't use your services or whatever. And also you're going to catch some people who have attributes or experiences that your system hasn't anticipated, and they're going to struggle, you're going to struggle. But the web's come a long way kind of in the last few years. And this is kind of the new cool web, this kind of personalized web. And as kind of things like big data and machine learning and all that stuff becomes simpler to use, bigger, easier to use, whatever, we can do really, really cool things for people. So like Spotify's Discover Weekly. So Spotify look at what I listen to. They look at kind of what everybody listens to, and they do some like amazingly complicated calculations and say, well, okay, because you've listened to a lot of this stuff recently, you might like some of these bands. I don't know who any of these people are. Like I took a screenshot of my thing, but I didn't listen to my Discover Weekly. But that's essentially what we do. Like we're trying to make a personalised web, and the way machine learning and the kind of way Spotify are doing this with behavioural data, so they're looking at things like I actually do on the site. But a way kind of perhaps we've traditionally done this is to look at demographics. Is to say, okay, we know that you're of a certain gender, we know you're of a certain age, we know you're of a certain background. Therefore, we're going to use that to recommend products to you or recommend services to you or that kind of stuff, right? And we do this by making assumptions. Assumptions are wrong. I know this is going to sound very kind of straightforward, but we know that assumptions don't fit everybody. It's kind of what the word assumption means. And as long as we're aware of that, that's kind of okay. You know, if you've ever done something where you've written You've written a user story, you've written a ticket, and you've gone, we've assumed that the user knows how to use an iPad, and therefore we don't have to kind of do certain things when we're building a piece of software or something like that. But we know that that's an assumption. We know that's not true for 100% of cases. Conversely, then, we know that there are facts, and all facts are right. And we are experts, right? We are, because if we weren't experts, people wouldn't hire us to make stuff for them. We know people because we, even if you're not practically involved in this, but we kind of, as an industry, do things like user research, we do user testing, we do analytics, we kind of explore domain knowledge, all that stuff. Like, we know people, right? We know how people use computers. I know how people use computers. I know there are facts, there are things that I know. And the problem occurs in the industry, I think, when we get the difference between facts and assumptions confused. Then it turns out that we start thinking all of the things we've assumed are actually facts, are actually correct. And there's a concept, I guess, and there's probably an actually really cool term for it, but I didn't do sociology, so someone have to correct me. But this idea of a cultural fact, there's lots of things when you think about it that you just know. And you don't remember when someone told you this, you weren't taught this at school, you know, there wasn't a big thing where your parents sat you down and said, right, okay, girls really like pink, right? Like, no one ever teaches, there's not a lesson about that. But there's things that you just know, and if someone says, well, how do you know that? You kind of think, well, I just know it, like everybody knows it. Which is how we end up in this situation, where there's no real evidence for it, but it is a scientific fact. This is from Brass Eye, which is sadly missed in the kind of current day and age. You know, there are things we go, oh, there's no evidence, I don't know the evidence, I don't know, but this is true, this is a fact. And we think this about people, right? There are facts that we know about people. And kind of, I guess what this talk is about is looking at some of those facts and realising that actually they're assumptions and then what we should do about them. So if anyone's seen me talk before or has followed me on Twitter, apart from me kind of talking about video games all the time, I talk about gender a lot. Gender is a thing that we know. We know, it's a cultural fact, that there are two genders. One of them is male, one of them is female. And these genders are completely separate, they're different. People don't move around between them. Like, you're born with one, you die with one, and everything's great. And this is a really good diagram of what gender looks like. And if you've ever heard the phrase, the gender binary, this is what we refer to. The gender binary is this cultural fact that there are two genders, which means you can make forms that look like this, right? And this kind of is a thing you see on a lot of kind of registration forms, things for you signing up for social networks, stuff like that, where everybody can use this form field, right? Because we can all just pick male, we can always pick, or don't all pick male. That'd be bad. But you can pick one gender, right? Because everyone has a gender, everyone has one of these genders, and then you pick the thing that you have. And job's a badger, really, when you think about it. Everything's good. Job's a badger. I said this once at another conference, and a couple of Americans got very confused. It's like Bob's your uncle, which is how then they explained it to me, which was really good. But basically, that's right. Yeah? We have a cultural fact, which there are two genders. And then because we know this cultural fact, we as software developers can go, hey, here's your form field. Ta-da. The next 5 minutes of this talk is a gender studies lecture. Oh, yes, I've tricked you all. Gender's really complicated. It's much more complicated than literally anybody thinks. I've kind of been talking about this for a couple of years, and there's still complexities and stuff to it that I learn about all the time. I'm going to quickly go over what gender means. So there's been really kind of awkward, tortured analogies for gender. I've used terrible ones, like colours and shapes, and, you know, what if some of us are triangles, right? You know, this is my new favourite. Well, it's not new, but this is my favourite one because I came up with it, therefore it's great. That actually, gender is made up of lots of different facets to a person. Some of them are biological, some of them are social, some of them are individual. And then what you need to think about, I guess, is when you're asking someone what their gender is in a form, which of these things do you actually care about? Is it all of them? Is it any of them? Is it none of them? So I'm just going to quickly go over each of these and share some cool, quirky, interesting facts about them. So if we start with, this is a laser pointer, doesn't it? Yes. Start with chromosomes. We tend to not care about chromosomes in the web development world. But you might do. You might work for one of those cool genetic testing sites or something like that. Or you've read the internet and you've looked at the comments on an article about gender, and there's always someone in there that goes, wow, there's XX and there's XY and there's nothing you can do about it. Number one, don't read the comments. Number two, It's not right. There are lots of different chromosomal variations, some of them of which, does anyone in this room actually know what their sex chromosomes are? No, like we don't, right? We assume them. But lots of people have things. So some of them are quite symptomatic. Some of them are quite life-threatening. So things like girls who were born with only one X chromosome, that's quite kind of drastic. But you can also have 3 X chromosomes, never find out about it. You can appear female, identify as female, have XY chromosomes. And if you don't have kids, never find out about it. Women in 2008 with XY chromosomes actually gave birth naturally to a baby girl who also has XY chromosomes. Chromosomes are fun. Like I said, we don't really care about those, right? We're not really bothered. We don't really talk to people about the chromosomes. We talk to people about the fun stuff, like sexual characteristics. And by this, I essentially mean bodies. So these are things like your genitalia. These are things like facial hair. These are things like even body structure. Women tend to be shorter and narrower. Men tend to be tall and broad in the shoulders, all that kind of really fun stuff. And so if you kind of work in things like health or fitness, because fitness is really cool now, kind of, with wearables and stuff, this is why you tend to ask people what their gender is, because you actually are using that to map. You're mapping gender essentially onto this kind of physical body, and you're going to use that for stuff. Where was I going with this? So this is fun. So again, we're kind of talking about 2 groups of people here. So there is intersex. So intersex people are people who are born, essentially, they are born with a body that doctors find difficult to classify. So if you've ever heard or seen the phrase assigned gender at birth, you'll see some people say, I'm assigned female at birth, I'm assigned female at birth. Essentially what that means is when you are born and you're a baby, hopefully you're a baby when you're born, the doctor kind of looks at you, they kind of just look at your genitalia and go, yep, you're a boy, or yep, you're a girl. Intersex people, when doctors look at you and they can't easily make that distinction, for various reasons, it's incredibly common. It's like maybe 1 in 2,000 births in the UK. That's quite a large number of people when you think about it. And we're also going to talk about transgender people. So transgender people are people who are assigned one of these genders at birth, and then later in life realise that they identify as the other gender, or a different gender, and then transition from one gender to another. This is a very long and arduous process, and people can be at multiple different stages along this process. This process takes a long time. And so when people are using your site or your service and they're going through this process, their kind of gender is going to change as they use your product, and that's something to think about. Quickly then, just gender expression is how you present your gender to the world. This is this kind of really, this really kind of cool idea that women wear dresses. I'm not wearing a dress, obviously. But there's certain clothing, right, and there's certain styles, there's certain hairstyles, there's certain makeup and stuff like this that we associate with gender and that people present themselves in different ways. If you work on a site that sells clothing, for example, you'll kind of know that's how that works, right? You have men's clothing and women's clothing. Men's clothing tends to have much better quality. I don't know, don't get me started. If you want to get me started later, ask me about the difference between like men's jumpers and women's jumpers. Pockets. Women don't need pockets, we've got handbags, etc. But this is a thing that you may come across, right? That you might go, actually, okay, I'm going to ask you what your gender is, because I work you work for a clothing shop or something, and then you're just going to send that person a load of emails about, hey, these dresses are really nice, whereas actually they want to shop and get men's jeans because they like pockets or something. Gender role is, again, the really cute idea that women don't work in technology, that men don't work in education. The idea that basically there are certain roles that you assign to one gender or the other. Women, we're nurturing and lovely and caring and all that really nice stuff, and men are cold and logical and, all that kind of stuff, which is fun. Gender identity, I think, is the one I want to talk about, because I think that's what a lot of you are asking. So when you ask someone what their gender is, that's essentially what you're asking them. You're just asking what their gender is. And you're not really thinking about all these kind of chromosomes or expressions or something like this. But this is a really difficult topic, and gender identity is the hardest one to explain because it's not very tangible. It's not related to a kind of a physical thing. It's not related necessarily to a social thing. It's a very individual thing. And this is why I want to talk about non-binary people. So non-binary people, I'm non-binary myself, and what that basically means is I don't identify as being male or female at all. So if I go back to this form, if you give me this form field, I can't fill this in. None of these options apply to me right now. And that has consequences. The thing that most people actually ask me about this talk is, why should I care about this? How many people does this affect? And we think it's about between 1% and 5% of the population, if you get all the non-binary people and trans people and sex people together. This is only going to get bigger. There was a survey the other day, 12% of millennials, it's a horrible phrase, but 12% of the under 30s, should go with that, don't identify as being male or female anymore. That's 12% of users. If you're working in that market with that age range, you might be missing out on all of those people. But this is all nice, and we've all learned stuff about gender, and we're all very happy about it. What does this actually mean in like kind of cold, hard business terms? It means you're going to hold data about me which is wrong. It means that if you give me that drop-down, I'm going to fill it in with whatever I want to. And it's wrong. And data that's wrong is unusable, because why would you collect data that's wrong, right? So it means that it's really hard to perform analytics on that data. It's really hard to kind of do any kind of work with that data because you don't know the accuracy. It's wrong. It also means you're going to make assumptions about me based on that data, and those assumptions are also going to be wrong. There's kind of a chain effect. YouTube. I'm going to talk about YouTube. So even though I've told Google my gender is non-binary, at some point in my life I've told Google I was a woman. So when I watch YouTube now, I constantly get adverts for pregnancy tests. All of the time. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. If you don't know, like, change your gender to female on, like, YouTube. It doesn't matter what you're watching. Like, I'm not watching videos about babies, right? I'm watching people play video games because I'm a loser. But I'm constantly getting adverts about pregnancy tests because they've made the assumption, like, right, you're a woman. We all know all women really care about babies. They love babies. They're looking forward to having babies. Therefore, we want to remind them that they can buy pregnancy tests every 10 minutes. But all of this is wrong. I'm never going to buy a pregnancy test. So you've missed an advertising opportunity. Like, if YouTube had looked at it and gone, right, this person's watching a lot of people play PlayStation 4 games. Maybe if they'd advertised some PlayStation 4 games, I'd have gone, oh, sweet, yeah, I'll buy that. Instead of going, hey, do you want to know if you're ovulating? And I'm going to go, not right now, I'm kind of okay. But it means you're kind of making all these assumptions, and all these things are based on cultural facts and all these things. And it all comes from the fact that you hold data about me which is incorrect. And that you're being horrendously sexist at the same time. And this essentially means that I'll probably stop using your service altogether. Which probably isn't something that someone at YouTube thought about. They didn't think, oh, our algorithm's going to show all these people pregnancy tests, therefore they'll stop watching YouTube. But you might do. And it also means I'm going to tell other people that your service is terrible. Because we live in the age of social media, and that's what we do now on Twitter. We get angry at companies and tell all our friends about it until they kind of, for publicity reasons, decide to give us what we want. And if you're in a minority, so a gender minority, an ethnic minority, whatever, we kind of all hang out together. We kind of all talk to each other. We all kind of say, hey, like, don't sign up to the service because they're constantly sending you, like, pregnancy test adverts. It's awful. That's what it means for you as a business. But we're supposed to care about people as an industry. So what this means to me as a human being is actually this is really hurtful. This is really painful. If for some reason you're showing me a lot of pregnancy test adverts, but this is an area that's very emotional, it's very big, it's very difficult, and I could be hurt by those assumptions. Being misgendered constantly when people kind of assume I'm one gender that I'm not, that's painful, it's difficult. You're causing people distress when you were only selling them a book, and that's not something you perhaps expected or have compensated for. It also means that when your data is leaked, people will consume that data. And I say when, I'm not saying if. Like, we live in a world now where data is leaked all of the time. Like data I kind of don't even believe that people hold. So there was a thing beginning of the year, Troy Hunt was talking about these teddy bears that got hacked. I don't know if anyone saw about this. So essentially there's a teddy bear where like kids could record like messages and stuff on it. And then there was a big thing where apparently people don't put passwords on their MongoDB databases. And people went through the internet basically and got all of these unsecured databases and ransomed them. And this one database was like, okay, here where all these audio clips of children are. Children's toys getting hacked all the time. It's stop connecting children's toys to the internet is one takeaway from this. But you can see how that's a vulnerable population. So if you're collecting this data and this data is wrong or this data is sensitive, you have to think about, well, what happens when this data gets leaked out to the internet? And all data is connected. I mean, like I said, because you've assumed one thing about me, like my gender or something like that, this is going to leak into other ways that you've collected data or think about data. So I appreciate that this got really heavy for a moment. I'm going to sort of breathe in, calm down a little bit, and talk about something super straightforward, right? Because there's no way this could go wrong. Let's talk about names. I love names. We all have a name. Names are great. And when we always ask people their name, right? So I guess a lot of us now don't really ask about gender anymore, which is good, but is slowly getting me out of the speaking career, which is why I've kind of stuck names in here instead. But we all have a name, so... A name is a really simple thing to ask somebody. Or is it? If it was, it wouldn't be in the talk. So buckle up. This is what we think a name is. This is kind of what a British name is, I suppose, is the best way to say it. It's made up of a title. So you Mr., Mrs., what have you. It's made up of a first name, made up of middle names, optional or multiple, and it's made up of a singular surname. So my full name would be like Mix, Chad, Phoenix, Rose, Gowler. I only say this because I've just changed my middle name to Phoenix and I really like it and I want to tell people how cool I am. But that's essentially what a name is, right? The name is these 4 things. Let's talk about names a little bit. Let's talk about titles. Titles are a particular bugbear of mine. And I'm going to quote myself and tell you to stop, essentially. Stop asking people what their title is. This is a bit odd, I suppose, actually. But there's kind of a couple of reasons behind this. I have not just kind of gone a little bit weird and hated titles for no reason. First of all, a title is not a legal part of the name. When you kind of start looking into legalities of names and kind of British law, there's not really such a thing as a legal name particularly. But titles definitely aren't a legal part of my name. It is perfectly legal and legitimate for me to tell you I do not use any titles at all. How many of you have a title field that's not optional, right? A lot of people. But they don't have, like middle names, right? We don't make people tell us our middle names because we go, well, you don't have to have a middle name. You don't have to have a title either. And the other reason I hate titles is because I have a title that nobody ever thinks about, which is Mix. So Mix is, I want to say it's new. It's not too new, but it's getting traction. It's kind of getting more popular. It's a gender-neutral title, kind of derived from the fact, that Mr. and Mrs. will both start with M, and then we've got the X as like a wild card type thing. HSBC, like a couple of weeks ago, actually, they offer 10 gender-neutral titles. I've only heard of like 2 of them. So there are way more titles out there than any of us are aware of. But you should add Mix as an option. And the reason I say this is, A, it's my title, and I like using it, and it makes it sound cool. B, the reason you might legitimately want to ask someone for their title is because you're matching them up to identification. So I work with children, so I have a DBS certificate, like a criminal records check. And when I was filling the form out, they said, right, your name has to match your ID. So if you have middle names on your driving license, you have to then put them in this form, right? This has to match your ID that you're providing as evidence exactly. And then they didn't have Mix as their title and Mix as on my driving license. So you can see for me that causes difficulty because I'm there going, well, this is really important. Like, is this check going to go through? Is it not going to go through? Is it going to... And it did go through, which kind of proves that they shouldn't ask me about my title in the first place. It doesn't really matter. But do you see what I mean? That causes distress, right? You're asking me to do something very explicitly, very importantly, and I can't do it because your title drop-down is out of date. So what you could do instead, actually, is do the kind of really fun... I say fun, it's not much fun. But, when you have, like, an other and then, like, a text field, so people can write what they want. My only warning to you is if you do that, please put a text field. Otherwise, we end up with this email that I got from Petplan the other day. I'm not the Gowler, I'm the other one, which is infuriating. But you see what I mean? Like, people are going, we're going to have an other, but we don't have a text field. For whatever reason, Sky do this as well. I'm just kind of dropping my company in it. But but people kind of do that, and they perhaps can't do the text field because of, reasons, data reasons, legacy reasons, or whatever. But if you're going to do that, like, don't... But the dog's cute, so, it's all worked out in the end. Names. Okay, so we've established that titles, we don't need them. We also kind of established that no one ever asks you what a middle name is. Like I said, the only time I ever get asked what my middle name is when it's something like checking ID or something like that. We don't tend to ask people what their middle names are, which is good. Interestingly, now I have 2 middle names. NatWest apparently can't fit my full name onto my bank statement, which was a really good half-an-hour discussion with them last week. So, surnames. We'll kind of leave out first names. I think first names are kind of fairly personal, but also not that kind of important from kind of... We don't tend to address people by their first names in kind of formal conversation. But let's go on to surnames. Surnames are really good fun. Here's some facts about surnames. The eagle-eyed among you will notice that I've put scare quotes around the word facts, which may tell you kind of where this section of the talk is going. So, facts we know about surnames. We know everybody has one. We know everybody has one. They only have one. You might have a double-barreled name, and whether that's one or two, I guess, is kind of up for debate, but everyone has one surname. We also know that your surname comes from the man who has the most ownership over you. Traditionally, right? So you are either male and you have your own surname, but your surname basically comes from your father or your husband. And this applies to everybody, but that's where your surname comes from. It's an ownership thing. Feminism. And we also know that when we're writing a form, we're writing some labels, we can use the terms first name, last name, and family name interchangeably. They all mean exactly the same thing. Right? These are things we know. We're designing a form or we're designing a database table, whatever, we can kind of go first name, surname. Surname can be 30 characters, etc. Here's some true facts about surnames. So I think Portuguese, other languages, multiple cultures have multiple surnames. So this means, A, you need to respect spaces. You need to respect apostrophes. I've got a lot of Irish friends who get very angry at the internet all of the time because they can't put apostrophes in surname fields. It means then that actually people then have to kind of pick a surname they're going to use in order to fit in with us, in order to fit in with our terrible forms. People having to change their identities because we basically haven't written databases properly. In the UK, there is no legal obligation for you to... We know that you don't have to change your name when you get married, right? A lot of people now don't change their name, or they change to a double-barreled name, or you can change to your wife's name, which is good, because if I had to change it to, the name of... my partner is a woman, so does that mean we wouldn't get surnames if we got married? She said that she's going to change her surname to undefined, because then we're going to break all of the databases. It's going to be great. But you don't have to give your children your surname either. And this is important when you're doing stuff like family plans. I've kind of seen places that go like, hey, instead of you all subscribing for £10 a month, like, you can all subscribe for £8 a month. It's a great saving. And the way they do this is go like, oh, well, your family are people who live in the same house as you and have the same surname. And obviously that's not true. I know Google is doing a family thing, which was going around the internet, and they're doing some really weird things about families and how they've decided what a family is, which doesn't affect reality in the slightest. But there's no obligation, so you can't assume. And when I was first talking about this talk on the Twitters, a friend of mine who lives in Quebec sent me a link to an article about a woman who's suing the government because she wants to have her husband's surname. In Quebec, you can't change your surname at all. So for them, it's not a... We kind of have everyone changed their surname. It's all kind of common enough that you can say people change their surname when they get married. In Quebec and kind of other countries, I think probably France as well, you can't change your surname when you get married. So there, you can't assume that two people aren't married because they don't have the same surname. Things are different across the world. And then you have things like Japanese, where you say the surname first. Surname and last name then don't mean the same thing. There's cultures where family names aren't they're not necessarily the name of the family, they might be the name of a town, they might not have a family name, etc. So surnames are really complicated. What this essentially means is, A, I've learned animations in Keynote, but B, there's no such thing as a real name. And that's a difficult thing to do if you're asking people for first name and surname. Because we do that, right? It's automatic now. If someone says, right, we're going to do a site, right, it's going to have users. Okay, these users are going to register. Okay, we're going to do first name, surname. But that doesn't really work. This link in the corner, which I tiny URL'd for aesthetic reasons, because it was breaking my slide layout otherwise, is a really cool resource by W3. It's very long, but they talk about names across the world, loads of things about the legality of names, how names change, things about some cultures that have kind of legal nicknames and the ways surnames change, and loads of stuff. So if you want to be truly international, and it's not even about whether, even if you sit there and go, well, we only operate in the UK, obviously people come to this country from other, well, they do for now. They come to this kind of country from other countries. So if you really want to make sure that your name field works for everybody, A, read this article, because it's really important. And speaking of cool resources, this book is amazing, Design for Real Life. I saw Sarah do a talk about it a couple of years ago at NUX, and try and check out that video if you can. It's really good. It talks about things like names, talks things like gender. It talks about loads of things about how we, this idea of, delightful experiences. We kind of have these really cool, there's a thing with, Facebook tells you all the cool, like, then it says, hey, it's a cool thing that's happened to you this year, and one guy, it's like his house burnt down. And they're like, hey, your house burnt down, have some balloons. Because there's no context, right? And then the book's kind of about how we design those kind of experiences, and we design forms, and we design the way we talk to people in a way that's a bit more human. But I don't just want to sit here and shout problems at you. I kind of do. But that's not really going to give you a good impression of me. So what I want to do is give you, not solutions, there's no solutions, essentially. And that's a hard thing, I think, for us as software developers to get our heads around, that there's no kind of one solution, there's no thing where I can say to you, do this thing, and you go away to work on Monday and go, we're going to do this thing and everything's fine. Instead, what I want to try and give you is a bit of a mini tool set of things, of ways that you can start these conversations, the ways you can kind of start looking at your own solutions, because your solutions are going to be very individual to your business, to your group of users, etc. So the first thing is stress personas. I originally wrote this talk for a UX thing, so this is going to be a little bit UX-y. But a persona, essentially, if you've never come across one, if you're not part of that conversation, a persona is essentially a fake profile we make for a fake person who's going to use our service. So you might go, okay, we're going to make up a woman called Samantha, she's 28, she loves streaming video, she loves technology, and then when we make a thing at Sky, we can kind of go, okay, then we're going to make sure that this would fit Samantha, even though she doesn't actually exist. So instead of having real people that you base yourself on, you kind of make these little fake profiles. So what you can do is make a stress persona. So in Design for Real Life, Sarah talks about how we tend to describe these things as edge cases. If someone says, okay, there is a ticket, and say, I can't put an apostrophe in the surname field, and you kind of sit there and go, this is an edge case. It's not an edge case because we're human beings with kind of thoughts and feelings. We're not edge cases. So but what we are is we are stress cases in which we put stress upon your system. We put stress upon the way your data is structured. And so a stress persona is where you think about, and even if you're not, like I said, if you don't know what persona is or you're not related to the personas of your company, like go and yell at your UX people and find out what your personas are, because you should be designing everything and developing everything with personas in mind, if that's the way your kind of company works. So. But a stress persona is for somebody where something you've done wrong in the system or something you can't work out in the system properly has a high impact but low frequency, like the gender field, right? I can't fill that in, so for me that's high impact because that's a blocker, but it's only 5% of the population, so that the frequency is low, but the impact is high. So just think about those, have those kind of people in mind when you're designing something. Question everything. I think if there's one thing, I don't want to say that software engineers are hive mind, even though I think we kind of are. But I think if we were one thing we all are, we're all very cynical people. We like questioning things. There's a really good book called Forms That Work, which I have not put a link to. But it's called Forms That Work, Designing web forms for usability. And there's a thing there called the question protocol. And the idea is that you, as a design exercise, you're designing your model, your tables, your forms, what have you. For every question you ask a user, no matter what the question is, you kind of write an index card together that asks these questions. So, who needs it? And by this I mean an actual person in your organisation or a department. But know this, don't go, I think legal need it, I think marketing need it. Find out. Go and find the person who asked for this and ask them what it is. And write that down. Who needs this? Which department needs this? Which human being needs this? Like an audit trail, right? Ask them why they need it. Do they need it because they've made an assumption? Do they need it? But do they need it for an actual reason? Do they need it for a legal reason? Do they need it for, do they need it just because they think it would be nice? Do we want it for analytics? Do we want it because we found out for user testing actually this information is really important? Ask them if they need it or do they just want it. And this is where the fun with marketers come in, because people who work in marketing think they want lots of stuff. Well, they think they need lots of stuff. They don't. They just want it. But it's an important thing to think about, right? So you go, well, if this is needed, then I need to put more thought into it than if it's just wanted. What happens if this data is wrong? What happens if you say, right, people have to fill out their name, but then what happens if I can't give them my real name? Or what happens if I can't give them my real gender? What happens if I can't give them my real date of birth? What happens to the users? What happens to their experience? What happens to us as a business? Are there legal ramifications if we're selling kind of adult products? And what happens if a 12-year-old comes along and tells us they're 18? That kind of stuff. What happens if that data is wrong? And then something that I've added, because I like talking, scaring people about data leakage. What happens if this data is leaked? What happens to this person? What happens to, again, what are the ramifications of this? What could happen? Because then you might think, well, actually then, perhaps we don't need to store this data permanently. Perhaps we can just keep this for the session. Things like credit card details, right? A lot of us, if you work in kind of online payments, we don't keep the credit cards, right? There are services that do that for us because we have decided actually the risk of having credit card information on our servers is too great. And so we don't keep them. They kind of transient and go through. There might be other things about people that you kind of think, well, actually, people's addresses, do we need to keep those, or can they just go through? And just by doing this exercise, you might decide, okay, some things are really risky, we won't do them. You might decide, actually, it's cheaper for us to design something that fits most people, and we'll just accept that we're going to funnel people through a call centre or funnel people through a physical store or something like that. And that's fine. I'm not saying don't ask people questions, because that's not really going to help anybody. It's just about asking the right questions. Talk to other human beings about stuff. If you're kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to build a medical app, and I know there are transgender people, but I don't really know how to ask them this question, go and find some people and ask them, or Google it, because there's lots of resources out there about all this kind of stuff. If people have specific questions about asking about gender, totally kind of hit me up. It's kind of a thing I kind of I've spoken to a few companies about now, so I have advice. And just to recognise that people know who they are and you don't. If I come to you, I send a ticket to you that says, I can't use your site for this reason, don't turn around and say, of course you can, or just do this, which happens to me a lot with titles. I say, well, just put miss. I'm like, well, why? It's not my title. Why would I do that? I know what my title is and you don't. Just respect people. Be flexible. People need to change information with you over time. People need to change their name with you. I've just changed my legal name. Chad's not the name I was born with, funnily enough. So I've just changed it. And it's proving to be a massive nightmare. Please make sure that people can change their names with you easily. It's been awful. But people are going to need to change their information all the time. And allow space for extra options. Like I said, I've been saying to people, use mix as a gender-neutral title, but now there's like 10 gender-neutral titles, and in 20 years' time there's going to be who knows how many gender-neutral titles, or different types of titles, different genders, different things. Be flexible, be open, future-proof your software. Let's talk about forms. I love forms. Users like text fields. We like free text fields. Developers don't like free text fields because that's how SQL injection happens. That's how spam happens. Remember when you're a kid and you're filling out a form and there has the sex column and you write yes please next to it because you're really cool and mature, you know. Free text fields have that problem, right? That you can write whatever you want in it. So analytics can't really do a lot with stuff with that. Developers can't do a lot of stuff with that. And that's fine. So we're kind of a bit of a quandary. And I think to myself, whenever I'm lost, wherever I don't really know what to do with myself, I ask Zoidberg what I should do. And Zoidberg tells us we should do both. So a couple of examples. Facebook. They were kind of the first big social network to do this. The way they decided to solve this problem, and this is actually a text field now, but back when they first did it, they have this list here, and there's about 60 options on the list, and I can pick as many of these things on the list as I like. So for me, you're asking what my gender is. It's a difficult slide to read. They're asking what my gender is, and I can kind of build up my gender out of lots of different tags, essentially. This is tags, right? It's a taxonomy. It's not difficult. So for me, that's great. And then for you, that's great because then you can look at it and go, well, actually, then we know that X number of people pick non-binary. We know that X number of people put female. We know X number of people put this. Interestingly about Facebook, with their gender stuff, Facebook still asks you your biological sex when you sign up because that's how their advertising model works. Facebook also don't expose this data through the API. So a lot of the times when I'm signing, when you sign to Facebook, through Facebook, through OAuth, and they say you're going to share this information, Facebook think my gender is not specified because they've given this to us, but they've not exposed it to the API, which is frustrating. You'll also notice on here, I spoke about my pronouns earlier because I use they and them as my pronouns. There are lots of different types of pronouns out there, and this has become more of a thing that people's pronouns aren't necessarily what you expect them to be. Facebook also asks me what my pronouns are. You can't see it under the drop-down. But Facebook, I can choose between feminine, masculine, and neutral pronouns. Do that as well. That'd be really cool. Then we can avoid the whole other Gowler incident. Also, privacy. If you're working in the social sphere, please tell people what you're going to do with their data, who's going to see it, allow people to change so they can see it. My friends can see this, but my parents can't, for example. Scratch. This is going to look awful. Oh, my God. Scratch is an awesome, if you want to teach kids how to code, use Scratch, it's great. It's an online thing for teaching programming that uses drag and drop puzzles and stuff. Use it as an adult, it's really good fun. And obviously they kind of they're asking children about themselves, right? So they kind of have to be a bit more careful. And they very helpfully, underneath if you hover over that, it tells you what they're using that data for, which is really good because it helps you make an informed opinion. But the gender field, I can pick male, I can pick female, or I can write in whatever I like. Here, it's for RC, but that's a text field essentially. So I can put in whatever I want, but you can still pull out, well, they can still pull out data and says we've got X number of women, X number of men, X number of people who fill in the blank field. If you're going to do this, I notice they've not used a label. There is a label underneath there for accessibility reasons, but please try to avoid other as a label. It's othering and annoying. Please also try to avoid transgender as a label, because it's not a gender in and of itself. Because people think they're being very inclusive, and they think, okay, we're going to have male, female, transgender. I still can't fill that form out because I don't consider myself transgender. Transgender people who are transitioning from like male to female to male will just put the gender that they are. I've had this discussion with lots of people. I don't always listen to me, etc. But like things like non-binaries are fairly good third option if you're going to kind of have third options. Prefer not to say. That's also really good. Use that. But you can see here, these are kind of two examples of forms where we can compromise a little bit. When it comes to names, I think, again, terrible picture. Free text fields are great because people can write where they want. Don't put like kind of, we're not in the era now where you need to have really arbitrary limits on database fields because we've kind of, like, storage is cheap, right? You can kind of, people can have whatever they want in these kind of fields. But then you kind of have this thing about, okay, so what do I call you in an email? Ask that as a separate question. How do we refer to you? Because some people don't mind being called by their first name. Some people might want to be, dear, title, surname, whatever. Don't call people dear customer. But, the point of this is the full name, anyone can fill this out. And then ask the question because the question you actually want to ask is, how do I refer to you in an email? Or what do I write on this address slip when I'm sending you a product? You don't actually really care what my name is. So think about the actual question you want to ask. And then a bit on error messages. I am not invalid. Invalid is not a word that normal people use. Well, I shouldn't say normal people. But people outside the technology sector don't use the word invalid very often. It's not a common word. It's not in the kind of top 1,000 words. If you've seen that XKCD with the UpGoer 5, it's not one of those kind of words. But we use it a lot in error messages. We say to people pull out their really long name, or they pull out their name with their apostrophe or their space or whatever, or they go into Chrome DevTools to change the title they're going to submit in the dropdown because it's not an option in the dropdown. And then you return an error message that says your title's not valid, your name's not valid. My name and my title and my gender are valid. Your system is broken. So instead, what you should say to people is you should help people make an informed input, right? You should say, okay, actually, we're only asking for male and female because we need to match to a passport or a driving license or something, and they only have those flags on. More countries now are allowing people to put X on their passports for unspecified gender. So if you're going to match up to passports from people from other countries, you have to allow people to kind of have a third option there. Just a quick note. So instead of saying your name is invalid, say something like, actually, we can only accept names without spaces, and then people can kind of go, okay, I can pop a hyphen in, or I can just pick one of my surnames, or I can... People will then know how to fill the form in. Meet people halfway. If I see anybody using the word invalid, again, on a form, I will find them, and I will politely ask them to stop. So, like I said, this is a massive topic, and I've rattled through it quite quickly. Is everything we know wrong? Probably. I don't want people to think that, though, because it's really easy for me to stand here and complain, and it is really easy for me to stand here and complain. But I don't think everything we know is wrong. I just think that we don't know everything. Everything we know is actually just incomplete. We're quite a homogenous sector, right? We're overwhelmingly white and male and able-bodied, which means we don't really have that infinite experience to draw on all of the time. We only kind of have our own experiences. And there's lots of things in there, this whole kind of known unknowns and unknown unknowns. There's loads of things out there we don't know yet, we don't understand. But we're problem solvers, right? So really, when you think about it, it's our job to find all this stuff out. Thank you very much. Questions?
I can't believe no one has a question. Okay, good.
Actually, it's not really a question, but just thank you very much. I was actually talking about this yesterday. I'm just designing a form.
Okay.
And I was told, we need to collect title, first name, middle name, last name. And just coincidentally, because my wife's from Indonesia and they don't have those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So luckily I was somewhat prepared, but what you said is very, very useful. And I was thinking something along the lines of, what do you want to be called? Or what is your nickname or something like that? And then give us your legal name, because the end result will be certificates and things that need to be printed formally.
Right.
But very, very helpful. So thank you very much.
No problem. Definitely check that. I'll pop these slides online, but definitely check out the W3R. I'll pop back to the slide.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. It's really, really good.
Yeah. You said avoid using other.
Yes.
I like the idea of just offering a few genders, for example, and then just saying, or just pop your whatever you identify as in this box. But have you got any idea what we could call that instead of other? Neither. Yes.
So yeah, I guess because you still want a label, right? So you still want to have your. So either you can still offer discrete options, but offer more of them to have things like non-binary, have none as well. There are people who identify as not having gender at all. So you can kind of do that. Gender non-conforming, I know, pops up in other forms. Yeah. Otherwise, just something like please specify. It's quite good. So you have male, female, and then please specify, and then people use that. That's quite a good one I've seen before.
I mean, in our case, we don't really care too much about their gender, but we need to collect it to make sure that we're not discriminating. So.
Yeah, I think for kind of things like that as well, it's really important to use help text in forms. People don't use enough help text. So if you say to people that's what you're collecting that data for, people will know what they want to put. So kind of, I guess, for safety reasons as well, something I guess I didn't really touch on, but for some services, I probably won't write non-binary because I don't want them to know. I don't trust them with that data because that's kind of quite vulnerable data. But if you say, actually, this is for diversity monitoring, I might be like, yeah, I want to tell you that non-binary people exist. So help text on forms is really, really helpful for that kind of stuff.
Thanks, that was really good. I actually do a presentation based exactly on that W3 Names article. And I think the biggest takeout from that is only ask for the information that you actually need. And then, as you say, explain why you need that information as well. Because more often than not, you just don't need huge amounts of that. I mean, someone tweeted before about registering for the Wi-Fi here. It's great. First of all, it's got a gender field. Why? The second thing is someone did put a screenshot. It's male or female. That's also presumably you're not on the Wi-Fi. Here.
No, I've not signed up to the Wi-Fi.
But I mean, like, why? Why? And that's the thing that we can. My takeout is that we as web developers are often asked to build these forms, and we're given the fields that we're told to build. And I think it's our responsibility to be going, why?
I want to find, talking of Wi-Fi, I have a great example of how Wi-Fi people do this badly. Somewhere. Someone sent me this. I think it's from an airport. Is this one? You might be able to see it very well. This is from Barcelona Airport, where they, instead of asking male and female, have used short hair and long hair. That's why I love this talk. Please send me your terrible gender fields if you find them. I love them. But yeah, kind of. So as long as they're using the words male and female, at least it's better than this one. Again, don't do that. I've got very short hair. So again, I'm not going to put in what you're expecting.
Maybe they just want to know what your hair looks like.
Maybe they do. Maybe I don't want to say. Maybe they just do want to know if I've got funky hair. Which is, I think, this is annoying me that I've only got one cross out thing, so I'm probably at the end. But yeah, I saw it. Someone sent me a yoga app where they're using like the Venus and Mars symbols and stuff, and don't do it. So, anything else?
Cool. Oh, there's all the rest are over there. Hold on.
I'm between, all of your questions are between you and dinner. I just wanted to point that out very quickly.
You still want to ask your questions? Yeah.
Hello. There seems to be a bit of a shift recently away from usernames and more towards real identities. Do you think going forward services will continue to care about our names rather than something we pick to identify ourselves?
I think so. There's been a push to use real names because people think that's going to solve the issue of internet trolling. So Facebook are quite behind this idea that if we all use our real name, we'll all be nice to each other on the internet. I mean, if Facebook's proved everything, is that that's not true. It's also incredibly problematic because you end up with this thing like, what is a real name? What about people who have changed their names for kind of safety reasons, etc. I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because like when I first started using the internet, it was all usernames, and you never used your real name on the internet. And it was all kind of like IRC and ICQ and that kind of stuff. Whereas kind of now, like you just sign up for stuff with your real name straight up, and people use their real name as their Twitter handles and things. I like to be cool, and I don't. I think, again, it's just thinking about kind of what you want that for, and recognising that. Yeah, there's a difference between a real name and a legal name as well, I think. As someone who's kind of had two names, because I've been Chad for like 15 years, but I've only literally changed my legal name like a month ago. And so for me, then that becomes an interesting thing, because then what is my real name? Because my legal name is a name I don't use on the internet, so if I'm on an internet service, what is my real name, that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's a cultural thing, I don't know whether just kind of people don't really think about usernames anymore. But we should do, allow people to have usernames. That would be good.
Anyone else? Yeah, let's take one more.
Please come and grab me afterwards. I'm totally up for email me or tweet me or whatever. I'm totally up for answering all people's questions later.
Yeah. Have you got any tips for dealing with situations where a third party is dictating that you do need a binary gender? Just to give you an example, we work with registering for sports teams, and the governing bodies of sports are very binary. You're either competing in this or that.
Yep. So, first of all, if you can tell people that reason, so if you say, actually, so education is bad for this as well, actually, that they kind of are very stuck with binary gender. In terms of things like gender and sport, this is an entire talk all by itself. I think for stuff like that, ask people to say, okay, we're asking your gender because we are going to, these are the categories in which you're going to compete, and then people will, so trans kids and stuff will know which ones they want to be put into. So I think the transgender male wrestler recently, does anyone see that? Yes, so there is a transgender guy, I think he's a teenager, was part of some wrestling thing, but they wouldn't let him compete with the men. He could only compete with the women, but he's already on testosterone, so he beat all the women very soundly because testosterone gives you, fight. I'm a good fighter, you can kind of tell by that. And so that became a really interesting thing. It's he's always going to beat all the women, but they're not going to let him compete with men. So yeah, kind of just explanation, just kind of say, this is why we're asking about your gender, is because we need to categorise you. You're going to be competing against other people in this gender, and then people can kind of pick. Trans people know what to pick, and then most people just kind of pick their gender and move on, I think. That helps.
Okay, cool. Well, this is a discussion I feel can run and run handily. We've got a lunch break coming up, so we can do just that, and I know Chad is always happy to chat. Thank you so much, Chad. This was excellent.
Thank you.